Chapter 2, The Core Axioms, the Fundamental Pillars of Their Ism. Chapter 2, The Core Axioms, the Fundamental Pillars of Their Ism. The Socratic method stands not as a mere repertoire of tricks for sparring and conversation, but as a disciplined architecture for thinking about virtue, knowledge, and the good life. In the dialogues attributed to Socrates, one can glimpse a set of deep-seated commitments, axioms, if you will, that shape every ask, every answer, and every pause between questions. Chapter 2 surveys these core axioms, the fundamental pillars that the Socratic ism rests upon. Read together, they reveal a method not only for philosophizing but for living. They are the skeleton of a soul's education, the scaffolding on which the entire edifice of Socratic inquiry is built. 1. The axiom of mindful ignorance: recognize what one does not know. One of the most startling moves in the Socratic enterprise is not a claim of certainty but a confession of ignorance and intentional, disciplined humility before the weight of truth. Socrates repeatedly insists that he does not possess the wisdom he challenges others to display. He is not claiming to know more than his interlocutors. Rather, he is alert to the possibility that what passes for knowledge may be little more than opinion dressed in confidence. In the Euthyphro, as in many exchanges, the method begins with a stance that avoids premature closure. Socrates does not rush to fill the room with conclusions. He asks, probes, and slows the pace of assent until the interlocutor's premises tremble under scrutiny. The axiom is practical as well as epistemic: if you do not know what you think you know, you cannot defend it with integrity. The aim is not to embarrass but to illuminate, to replace confident but hollow belief with a more durable grasp, even if that grasp is more fragile than a settled conviction. The paradox is central. Recognizing ignorance becomes the first, indispensable step toward genuine knowledge. This axiom places the soul in a posture of perpetual readiness to learn. It also acts as a shield against arrogance, the belief that one already possesses the whole truth. In the Socratic portrait, ignorance is not a vice but a starting point, a necessary condition for inquiry that never ends. The aim is not to parade feigned modesty but to cultivate honest assessment and epistemic humility that keeps the listener open to revision. 2. The axiom of definition: seek universal and essential forms, not an assortment of examples. A recurring test in the Socratic dialogues is the move from concrete instances to universal definitions. Socrates wants to know what it is in virtue of which a thing is what it is, not merely what it does in a single case. This axiom insists that philosophy does not settle for a gallery of anecdotes or a list of cherished practices. It seeks the essential form, the underlying nature that makes a thing what it is. The Euthyphro is a masterclass in this axiom. The pious act is shown not by piling up instances, sacrifices, prayers, rites, but by asking for a defining feature that makes all such acts pious across contexts. When Euthyphro defines piety as what the gods love and Socrates counters with a paradox, what is loved by the gods and why that makes something pious in the first place, the scene reveals a consequence. Particular acts may be pious or impious in a given moment, but a universal account must explain why those acts belong to the same form of piety across cases. This axiom shapes the method's ambition. The interlocutor is invited to offer a definition that captures the essence rather than just listing examples. If a proposed definition cannot withstand cross-application or cannot be revised to cover counterexamples, it fails. The method is content with no less than a form that would apply in any case to which the term is appropriately ascribed. The aim is not to win a debate about examples but to secure a stable, shareable understanding of what virtue or excellence in any domain must be. 3. The axiom of elenchus: refutation, the trial of premises through critical cross-examination. Elenchus, often translated as refutation, is the method's engine. It is not an exercise in winning a victory over an opponent, but a rigorous adjudication of the soundness of a claim. The aim is to test, through probing questions, whether the interlocutor's position rests on premises that can survive scrutiny when pressed to their logical consequences. In practice, this axiom produces two related effects. First, it reveals internal inconsistencies in the defended position, hidden contradictions that we often carry without recognizing. Second, it compels a reformulation of the initial claim into something more robust or, if necessary, into a more modest admission of ignorance. The goal is not to destroy the interlocutor but to bring the truth into clearer daylight and to refine the speaker's own understanding. The method's courage appears in the willingness to be shown wrong. Socrates does not pretend to know what he does not know, he invites others to join in a shared project of accuracy. That invitation requires a certain intellectual integrity. One must be prepared to abandon a cherished belief if the chain of reasoning leads to an untenable conclusion. The elenchus thus cultivates mindfulness about the structure of arguments, not merely their surface content. 4. The axiom of Maeutics, midwifery of ideas. The teacher as a midwife, helping others bring forth their own insight. Socrates likens his own activity to that of a midwife who helps deliver a child rather than giving birth to it himself. The Maeeutic form of inquiry is not about transferring knowledge from teacher to student, it is about eliciting knowledge already present in the student's mind or soul. The teacher's task is to foster the conditions under which the person can see, articulate, and test what is already there. This axiom grounds the pedagogical energy of the method. It suggests that the student's mind is not a blank slate upon which the teacher writes truths, it is a fertile field bearing seeds of insight that must be coaxed into consciousness. In the famous demonstration with the slave boy in the Meno, Socrates shows how questions can awaken latent knowledge of geometry. The method works by drawing forth what the learner already possesses and guiding it toward explicit articulation and verification. Maeutics requires patience, tact, and attentiveness to the learner's pace. It resists the impulse to fill gaps with ready-made answers. It honors the learner's agency, enabling a process by which the mind organizes and tests its own contents. The midwife's art is, paradoxically, a form of instruction that is non-coercive in appearance yet deeply formative in effect. The soul's education is achieved through the quality of questions and the atmosphere of collaborative discovery. 5. The axiom of virtue is knowledge, the unity of knowledge and virtue. If one knows the good, one will do the good. A controversial and enduring claim in Socratic philosophy is that virtue is knowledge. The idea is not that knowledge automatically guarantees right action in every historical circumstance, but that genuine knowledge of the good makes wrongdoing intelligible as a failing of understanding rather than a deliberate, self-justifying choice. If a person truly knows what is good, that person will act accordingly. Error arises from ignorance, not from a willful preference for evil. This axiom has multiple consequences for the method. It casts moral education as epistemic training. The aim is to cultivate true beliefs about the good and to align these beliefs with conduct. It explains why the dialogues treat many moral questions as questions of definition and explanation. Once the form of virtue is clarified, action follows with greater alignment to that form. Yet this axiom is not without tension. The empirical world shows many who know what is good in some sense but act otherwise due to competing desires, social pressures, or misinterpretations of the good. Socrates acknowledges the complexity by insisting on examination. A person must examine whether their professed knowledge is robust, whether it generalizes across circumstances, and whether it remains coherent under pressure. The axiom remains a living ideal, not a final verdict on human behavior, but a North Star that guides the conversation toward the deepest possible understanding of what counts as virtue. 6. The axiom of universality and essential form, revisited truth that holds across contexts. This second emphasis on definition is not merely pedantic. It reflects the conviction that the health of the soul depends on reliable, generalizable truths. A definition that binds a virtue to a universal form allows travelers across time and culture to recognize the same fundamental excellence when they encounter it. The form of courage does not change with the battlefield or with the era, the form of justice does not bend with political fashion. The search for universals in the dialogues often meets the friction of local customs, yet the method remains committed to the claim that there is a form of virtue adequate to all particular cases. This does not deny difference or context. Rather, it insists that context must be subordinated to a form that endures, and that the specifics of courage, piety, or justice be anchored in a definition that can stand under careful scrutiny. Universality is not about erasing differences, it is about discovering the consistent thread that makes diverse episodes into instances of the same virtue. 7. The axiom of the good life is the telos, the unexamined life is not worth living. This axiom is vividly proclaimed in the Apology: the aim of philosophy is the care of the soul and the pursuit of the good life. To examine one's life is to engage in a practical discipline with moral stakes. Inquiry is not a hobby but a form of spiritual hygiene. The Socratic project has a normative force. It asks us to live in such a way that our beliefs, choices, and actions can be integrated into a coherent, well-examined life. The method's commitment to the good life also has a political and civic dimension. The examined life requires a citizenry capable of reasons-based discourse, of listening and revising, of resisting dogmatism and demagoguery. In this sense, the axioms are not only about private virtue but about public integrity, the kind of character that sustains a just life within a community. The unexamined life is not merely a private misfortune, it is a social risk, for a polity built on undisclosed premises and unexamined values will eventually falter. 8. The axiom of humility and intellectual courage: admit ignorance, persist in inquiry. A corollary of mindful ignorance is a steady cultivation of humility and honest recognition of the limits of one's knowledge, paired with the courage to pursue truth despite discomfort or social cost. Socrates embodies this posture in every public exchange. He refuses to pretend that certainty resides where it does not, and he challenges others to move beyond comforting assurances toward more truthful accounts. This axiom has practical implications for how to conduct dialogue. It invites interlocutors to treat one another as fellow seekers rather than adversaries. It requires patience with the slower tempo of rigorous reasoning and a willingness to change one's mind when the conversation reveals a better account. The humility-courage pair creates a space in which inquiry can proceed without coercive domination and without strategic manipulation. It is a discipline of the soul as much as a discipline of argument. 9. The axiom of ethical purpose: the method serves the soul's health, not social victory. Embedded within these inquiries is a consistent ethical aim: to heal the soul, to cultivate virtue, and to purify beliefs so that they can guide a well-ordered life. The Socratic method is not an instrument for winning debates or producing clever rhetoric, it is a method of moral education. Its best work is done when a person emerges from the exchange with a clearer sense of what counts as virtue, a more precise understanding of the good, and a strengthened resolve to align life with those truths. This axiom also carries a caution about misapplication. The technique of asking questions can be used to win consent or to degrade others into confusion if wielded without respect for the interlocutor's humanity. The ethical aim requires care. The practitioner must honor the other as a person capable of growth, must avoid ridicule, and must keep the shared pursuit of truth at the center of the inquiry. 10. The axiom of public reason: philosophy as a communal enterprise. Finally, the Socratic method is not intended to be a solitary mental exercise. It thrives in a shared space, an agora or a forum where participants can examine their beliefs publicly, face to face. The method assumes an audience that values reason, seeks truth, and recognizes the vulnerability of being wrong. Dialogue is a social practice that builds trust through transparent, cooperative inquiry. The aim is not merely to out-argue an opponent but to move the community toward clearer, more defensible beliefs. In this sense, the method carries a political dimension. It defends the possibility of a reasoned, deliberative life against manipulation, polarization, and fear. It asks citizens to engage one another as co-inquirers, not as enemies. The publicness of the method is one of its most potent features. Truth, if it is to be shared, must be defended and tested in the open. The portrait in context: how the core axioms shape the Socratic project. The core axioms outlined above are not a rigid checklist but an interwoven tapestry. They inform how Socrates approaches every dialogue, every soul he encounters, and every moment of uncertainty. They illuminate why the method refuses to terminate in a single correct definition or a final verdict about a virtue. They reveal why the practice of questioning is not merely a technique but a way of forming character, of shaping the mind's posture toward life, truth, and community. These axioms also illuminate the differences between ancient and modern sensibilities. The Socratic project is not a blueprint for civic governance, nor a manual for persuasive rhetoric. It is a contemplative discipline that treats philosophy as a form of moral education. Yet the method's insistence on public reason, on universal forms, and on the primacy of the soul's health has a lasting resonance for contemporary concerns about truth, education, and democratic deliberation. The ism of Socrates is not a dogma to be defended but a practice to be learned and practiced anew in every generation. Axioms in practice, a sketch of how they interlock. To see how these axioms cohere, consider a hypothetical dialogue that embodies them. The interlocutor offers a provisional definition of courage as the ability to face danger without fear. Socrates begins with mindful ignorance. Is fearlessness the only mark of courage, or would a wise man who acts bravely in the face of danger also count as courageous? The exchange moves to a test of definition. Does the proposed account cover all courageous acts in a consistent way? If the definition fails to apply to a soldier's cautious but decisive action, or to a braver act undertaken in a less perilous situation, the form of courage is still under scrutiny. The maieutic element appears as Socrates asks the interlocutor to articulate the reasoning behind the definition, guiding them to reveal unexamined premises. The elenchus then probes those premises for coherence across cases. If contradictions emerge, perhaps the interlocutor concedes that sometimes fear can be virtuous in light of a larger good. The definition must be revised or replaced with a deeper account, moving closer to the essential form of courage. Throughout, the axiom of virtue as knowledge keeps the focus on whether the interlocutor's beliefs about courage line up with action that one would willingly defend as truly courageous. The public dimension remains intact as the dialogue unfolds within a shared space where others can observe the reasons and challenge them. The result is not merely a refined concept of courage but a cultivated habit of thoughtful, ethical inquiry. Challenges and critics: reading the core axioms with care. Of course, any account of Socratic axioms must acknowledge both the strengths and the limits of the method. Critics have pointed out that the elenchus can appear adversarial or even seductive in its own logic, coercing participants into agreement or into silent retreat rather than genuine understanding. Others note that the method's focus on universal forms can obscure the value of situated, experiential knowledge and can undervalue the moral complexities of plural traditions. Still others argue about the practicality of the virtue as knowledge claim when confronted with real-world moral ambiguity and conflicting goods. The Socratic answer, in the frame of these axioms, is not to abandon inquiry but to refine it, to balance humility with courage, to pursue universal forms while listening to historical particularities, to insist on definitions that must withstand cross-application while recognizing the moral weight of the conversational relationship. The aim remains the improvement of the soul and the cultivation of a shared space in which truth can be tested and, if found wanting, revised. Conclusion: the durable core of Socrates' method. The core axioms presented in this chapter offer more than a historical description of a dialogue technique. They illuminate a living practice, a way of approaching belief in life that treats questions as worthy ends in themselves. The axioms insist on humility before truth, demand clear definitions, empower a communal and ethical inquiry, and keep the guardianship of virtue at the center of education. They frame a method that refuses the easy satisfaction of comfortable opinions and instead asks for ongoing, courageous, and public examination of what we think we know. In the portrait of Socrates as the founder of a disciplined form of inquiry, these axioms stand as the fundamental pillars of his ism, the Socratic method. They explain why the dialogues feel both ancient and persisting, why the questions Socrates raises still echo in classrooms, courts, and laboratories of thought around the world. They remind us that philosophy, at its best, is a practice of life, a test of beliefs under pressure, a process of giving birth to clearer understanding, and a daily commitment to the health of the soul. If we can carry these axioms into our conversations, we participate in the oldest and most challenging of human projects, to think well together, toward lives that truly fit the truths we seek.